In the palatial bridge aboard the Bucephalus, Valerian Mengsk, heir apparent to the Terran Dominion, removed the stopper from a very rare vintage of tawny port, poured himself a small glass, and gazed out of the huge viewport window that occupied a full wall. The ugly planet of Char, red and sullen-looking, was prominently featured. There, a battle was taking place, one whose outcome meant everything to Valerian. On that volcanic, inhospitable world, either Sarah Kerrigan was being reborn, or the Queen of Blades was slaughtering those who had come to save her lost humanity. Out among the stars, too, a battle was still raging. The Zerg were uncontrolled, which was both good and bad. Good in that their attacks had no strategy. Bad in that they were so brutally random. His own vessels were involved, and he had seen at least 11 of the 25 battlecruisers he'd brought to fight destroyed. Even the glorious Bucephalus was coming under attack. There had been, and were still, so many ifs. If Raynor could find Kerrigan, if his team could place the artifact close enough for it to work, if the artifact even did work. Valerian had every confidence that it would. But of course, as an old quote so sagely held, the best laid schemes of mice and men go off the awry. Fortunately, thus far, it seemed his gamble had paid off. At least, if the out-of-control behavior of the Zerg was any indication. Even so, he kept his pleasure in check, mindful of the remaining ifs. If Raynor survived long enough to get Kerrigan to safety, if he would agree to turn her over to Valerian, then the higher apparent would celebrate in truth. In anticipation of the moment, Valerian had assembled a group of doctors and scientists. Granted, it was only an intern team until they could get Kerrigan to a more suitable faculty, but a fine selection nonetheless. They stood by, almost as excited as he, ready to begin examining Kerrigan the second she had arrived. Raynor was not a fool. The former outlaw had to know that these men and women were far superior to any so-called doctor or scientist he had on the Hyperion. Valerian was gambling that, in the end, the man's concern for his beloved would win out, and Raynor would want the best treatment for Sarah. Valerian swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his gray eyes thoughtful, and took a sip of the warming fluid. His tongue crept out to capture a stray drop. The power that would soon be his. The power to finally prove to his father that he was as strong a man and a better man than Arcturus Mengsk. But even more important to Valerian was the knowledge that Kerrigan had stored inside her skull. At least he hoped she still had knowledge. It could be that she would remember nothing of being turned into a monster, the glorious and terrifying Queen of Blades, the mistress of the Zerg. It could even be that her mind had been completely destroyed by the transformation. It would grieve him, such were the situation. More than power or wealth, Valerian was excited by and valued knowledge, particularly ancient knowledge, and surely Kerrigan had once been in possession of it. The soaring music emanating from the vinyl disc playing on the antique phonograph swelled to a crescendo, then came to a halt. The room was filled with a faint scratching noise. Valerian extended a well-manicured hand, lifted the needle, and started to replay the album. Old instruments began once again to play, and a human female voice, its owner dead for centuries, began to sing. One could use knowledge for personal gain, of course, but just like the opera to which Valerian was only half listening, it was beautiful and precious and held value simply for what it was, for simply being. He took another sip of port and reflected on the power of something called love. Valerian had loved his late mother, but other than that, he had little familiarity with the emotion. He'd known respect and affection for others, but never considered himself to have been in love. He hoped to, one day, as a man who craved understanding of all things, he wished to experience such a powerful force. More than once he had witnessed what it could do. Love had turned R.M. Dahl, an extremely efficient and selfish killer, into a woman who would be willing to kill and die for not just the man she unexpectedly found herself in love with, but also the ideals he cherished. In that man, Professor Jacob Jefferson Ramsey not only had loved her in return, but also had learned to understand, admire, and yes, love an entire alien species. Valerian freely admitted that he had not remained unmoved by the experience of getting to know these two people. It had made him regret even more what he had done later to Jake. Now, another man who loved with his whole heart had done Valerian perhaps the greatest service yet. The fair-haired prince well knew that Jim Raynor was the sole reason Sarah Kerrigan was alive now. Raynor loved her, despite what she had become, despite the atrocities she had performed. Loved her enough to risk his life and those of others, enough to walk right into the heart of the monster's lair without any idea whether he would find his death or his beloved. Remarkable, quite remarkable, all of it. Valerian swirled the remaining liquid in his glass and smiled slightly. He raised his glass and said in his rich, pleasant voice, "Well then, to love," and drained the last drops